What's up, everybody? We've got something a little bit different for you this time. We're going across the pond to showcase the Metabarons, one of the most awesome comics ever made. Big shout out to this guy for recommending it, because it is not only one of my favorite European comics, and it's something I'm willing to bet a lot of you haven't heard of, let alone read. Plus, it gives me a great opportunity to run my mouth off about a corner of comics many American fans never dip their toe into. Social media, social media, social media. You know the drill. Except, there's about 120 of you subscribed to the channel, and only about 20 of you following us on Twitter and Instagram. Oh, that's okay. I can't stay mad at you. I'm just a little bit disappointed. And as a special bonus this week, we have finally launched a website. Welcome to 1999. This one's really easy to remember too. alpharookie.com. Just like film, if you start to really get into it, you're eventually going to be exposed to foreign stuff.
Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl!
This happened to me with movies through Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa. In case you doubt our Kurosawa cred, go check out the first episode of the Alpha Cast, where we blab in depth about Seven Samurai. Okay, no more plugging our own shit. After watching Kurosawa, I quickly transitioned into modern Hong Kong cinema, such as Infernal Affairs and Election, and eventually culminated in the Korean New Wave with stuff like Vengeance Trilogy, Memories of Murder, etc. Anyway, when you get into stuff like this, you tumble down the rabbit hole. In comics, for me it started with Alejandro Jodorowsky, Mobius, and The Inkle. The Inkle is for France what Watchmen is for us here in the States in terms of the book's reverence and notoriety. Much the same way Watchmen acts as a gateway into the world of modern comics, it's no surprise that The Inkle was my first real exposure to European comics. So who is this guy, and what does it have to do with the Metabarons? In typical Alpha Rookie fashion, let's back up and do a little bit of brief history. I'm going to start by saying you should just watch a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune. I'm going to give you the short version because attempting anything more is just a big disservice to that film. It's brilliant, and a must-watch for film enthusiasts, comics fans, or really just anyone into the science fiction genre at all. In a nutshell, Jodorowsky is a Chilean, one-of-a-kind, crazy genius demigod, and he's put his mark on literally everything.
All my life I create.
He was a theater director, screenwriter, playwright, actor, author, poet, producer, composer, musician, comic book writer, and spiritual guru. And he was even a fucking mime. You know who else was a fucking mime? David fucking Bowie. Outside of comic fandom, Jodorowsky is probably most widely recognized as a filmmaker. Jodorowsky made a couple of films in the 70s that got a lot of attention from important folks including John Lennon. One thing led to another, and he was given an opportunity by a prominent French film producer to make whatever he wanted, so...
Dune. And he said yes.
Dune being the 1965 sci-fi epic novel by Frank Herbert.
I need to find the warriors.
So Jodorowsky moves to France and recruits a team of people who would go on to become some of the most important and influential professionals in genre history. This creative pre-production era yields a body of art and concepts that many call the greatest film never made. Never made because it was just really ambitious, and it would have been like 14 hours long. And who ended up actually making Dune? David Lynch. You know what else David Lynch made? Twin Peaks. You know who else is in Twin Peaks? David fucking Bowie. Even though Jodorowsky's version of Dune never comes to pass, O'Bannon, Giger, and Mobius go on to work on Alien, itself one of the most influential sci-fi movies ever. No matter what we do, it always comes back to fucking Alien. We are never gonna get away from this goddamn franchise. I'm just kidding, Alien, I love you.
And then I will use everything I put in Dune to make comics.
Jodorowsky eventually channels his imagination into comic books, and a lot of the massive ideas he had for his Dune movie make their home there. As I said before, The Inkle was my first real exposure to Jodorowsky. The Inkle is incredible, both the book itself and the influence it's had on modern comic book artwork. Mobius's artwork has inspired some of my favorite artists working today, like Jeff Darrow and Frank Quitely. Among all of Jodorowsky's comics, it's the most well-known and revered for good reason. But my personal favorite Jodorowsky science fiction comic is The Metabarons. Juan Jimenez's artwork is some of the greatest science fiction comic book craft ever. And if this doesn't get you off, then you have to turn in your geek card. I mean, just look at it. It's beautiful. It's just metal. It's so heavy fucking metal. I mean, it's just, what? Just, I don't have words. I can't, fuck. Titties. Giant armor. Giant fucking gun. Spaceship dick spaceship. Space sword. The first Metabaron story was released in 1992, a little more than 10 years after the Inkle, and is a spin-off of sorts. One of the Inkle's most popular main characters is the Metabaron No Name, so he gets his own series. Kind of. The reason the title is plural and not singular is because it's less about the character from the Inkle and more about his ancestors. It's a saga in the truest sense of the word. The Metabarons is the story of 5 generations of the Kastakas, the galaxy's greatest warriors, and how each subsequent generation's Metabaron succeeds the one before. There's Othon, Agnar, Steelhead, Agora, and No Name. The Metabarons doesn't have one story so much as it has a succession of stories, each centering on the next descendant in the Kastaka line. For example, part of the story of the first Metabaron, Othon, is about how he and his family must defend against an entire galaxy that's discovered their secret resource, epiphyte, an element that bestows anti-gravity properties, and later, while attempting to save his son Bari, Othon gets his dick shot off. You know how Luke turns off his targeting computer and uses the Force at the end of Star Wars to blow up the Death Star? Yeah, well, when dickless Othon gets into his ship, he plugs the thing into his groin, and he pilots it with his phantom cock. Part of the story of the second Metabaron, Agnar, is about how his mother was shot with an epiphyte bullet while he was still in his mother's womb. So when he was born, he was totally weightless. Whoa! Later, he gets his feet crushed by a foot-crushing machine while his father proudly observes to prove he can take pain and be a good Metabaron.
No way!
Then he gets bionic foot implants, and sometimes he detaches from his cyber feet at the ankles and goes flying around with giant robot claws.
Whoa!
Part of the story of the third Metabaron, Steelhead, is about how he got his name, because when he's a baby, he gets his head blown off and replaced with a robot head.
Whoa!
But later, he wants to learn how to love, so he seeks out the galaxy's last poet, but just so happens to be a head without a body, and so they Frankenstein themselves together and become Melmont, the Metabaron with a poet's mind and a warrior's heart.
Whoa!
And later, he fights a giant supralice that roves around the galaxy, sucking the life of entire planets like a fucked up Galactus.
Whoa.
There is such a crazy outflowing of pure imaginative ideas saturating every panel of the Metabarons that it's hard to suppress the desire to just recount the whole fucking thing. When faced with the question, what happens in the Metabarons, and then faced with the fact that entire dimensions are destroyed, that hearts are broken and mended, that characters die and are reborn all within just a few pages, the answer is clear. Everything happens in the Metabarons. Everything. Asking someone to summarize the plot of the Metabarons is like asking someone to recount the plot of the Bible. And while we're talking about the Bible, an important word to remember while reading the Metabarons is mythic, specifically of the Greek variety. Mythic because while science fiction is the glorious visual aesthetic in play here, the Metabarons is not speculative or hard science fiction. This is not Alien, this is not The Martian, this isn't even Star Wars with its space wizards. This is myth wrapped in spaceships. There is resurrection, cosmic destruction, creation of life, stopping of time, and immaculate conception, just to name a few. And why Greek myth? Because it has incest, patricide, infanticide, suicide, and self-mutilation. Nicide. Seriously, characters are pulling out their own eyeballs in this book. Speaking of patricide and self-mutilation, what exactly is a Metabaron? Well, there are some criteria. Number 1, you have to be a member of the Kastaka clan, a family lineage that goes way back. Number 2, you have to be male. Number 3, you must observe the Bushitaka, or the Johtoverse's version of Bushido. Number 4, you must be mutilated in some way and then augmented with technology, essentially making you a cyborg. They literally crush their own feet, cut off their own arms, etc. But cyborg, man, totally worth it. Number 5, a Metabaron must kill his father in combat before he can assume the title, i.e. patricide. Part of what makes the Metabaron special is not only how it shows the genesis and development of the Metabaronic traditions, but how often the book puts the characters in situations that make it seem impossible for the Kastaka line to follow those traditions, only to have the reader's minds blown by Jodorowsky's imagination. But wait, Steelhead's child is female? How will the Metabaron line continue? Read and find out. But how is Othon going to sire kids if his dick is gone? Read and find out. Basically, this shit is legit.
So good.
It's so good. So good.
So good.
If you're already a fan of Eurocomics, no way I'm not already preaching to the choir. If you haven't, I hope I've piqued your interest. So how do you read it? Well, there's a sexy hardcover published by Humanoids, and it will set you back about $60. You can also read it digitally on humanoids.com. You say you still want more? There have been 2 new Metabaron stories since the original run, Weapons of the Metabarons with art by Travis Charest, and The Metabarons Kostaka with art by Das Pastoris. And they just announced yet another Metabaron story with art by superstar Isad Rabik. I have been dying to see this guy do some pure science fiction stuff. Seriously, it's fucking good. Why are you still standing here listening to me talk about it? Go read it. Go. Shoo. Go on. Go.